Thank you, Vicky, for that very kind introduction, and thank you, Rachel, for that very enlightening talk. Wow, what a day. What a day it's been. Gareth said this morning, it's going to be awesome and you've got to buckle up, and he wasn't kidding, was he? Who's had a great day? Yeah? I'm always, whenever I come to this meeting, I've been fortunate enough to be coming to it since the very first one back in Pollock Halls in 2014, I think, Gareth. And I'm always just struck by the amount of energy and the sheer amount of passion in the room. The sheer amount of passion in the room. So I'm Mark Webster. It's a great honor to be with you this afternoon to wrap up proceedings. And I know it's a great honor because when I said to my wife, I'm giving this talk, I've been invited to talk at this event, she said, well, that's a great honor. She then went on to say, now, don't you go being all intelligent and witty and inspiring, just be yourself. Which I didn't really know how to take. But as always, Mrs. Webster was spot on. It is a great honor to be here. And whilst it's a great honor for me, to be honest, let's be honest with ourselves, it's a bit of a gamble for you, right? Because what does a bald, slightly overweight, middle-aged, all right, approaching middle-aged, Englishman, what can I tell you about passion that you don't already know, right? And the answer to that is obviously, basically zero. But as I mentioned, I've been, or as Vicky very kindly mentioned in the introduction there, I've been around a little while, and I've been fortunate enough to be a bit of a fly on the wall in quite a number of the conversations as these plans have been hatched and these initiatives have been initiated that have led to all of the wonderful milestones that Jim ran us through today and that we've been celebrating during SCAS 25. So as an interested observer, Gareth asked me to give some of my observations as to how you've pulled it off, really, and what perhaps others can learn from the journey that you've been on. And I'm going to do that through a lens, and it's going to be through the lens of collaboration, because it's very clear to me that collaboration is a key ingredient in the secret sauce that you've brewed up here north of the border, okay? So through that lens of collaboration, we know, of course, that collaboration is nothing new in the world of resuscitation. If we go right the way back to the very first Utstein meeting here back in 1990 with such luminaries as Peter Saffer, Peter Baskett, the much admired, the highly respected, and the dearly missed Douglas Chamberlain, those guys very early on realized that when it came to resuscitation, it was always going to be a collaborative effort. We've seen that in the formation of ILCOR. We've seen that in the founding of the Resus Councils. We see it in the guidelines every 5 years when they come out. In fact, you could argue there's a strong case to be made that collaboration is the very oil that has lubricated the evolution of the chain of survival over all these years, up to and including this latest iteration that Charles Deacon showed a few years ago. So collaboration is very much in the DNA of the resuscitation community. And it lies very much, in my observation, at the heart of all that you've achieved up here in Scotland. As you've lit the way along the path to moving the needle in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest care, collaboration has been very much part of it. From the very early days of TopCat and 3RU, you've worked with the very best and brightest in the space, right? And that has led to a community, a collaboration, a whole network of folks and organizations, both near and far. Some of them fairly obvious, like the ambulance service, fire and rescue, British Heart Foundation, our very own Resuscitation Council UK. But some that are not so obvious, some that are, a little left field, let's say. Who'd have thought, for example, that the university's mathematics department would have a role to play in improving cardiac arrest care? But look at the work that they've done in PADMAP, look at the work they did in Wildcat a few years ago. So this collaboration has been very much at the heart of all these wonderful milestones you've achieved. And it strikes me that it's also been at the heart of creating a real culture of change, which my observation is that you've done here in Scotland, and that's what we're celebrating today. But how, I wondered, have you managed to overcome some of the pitfalls of change management? We know change isn't easy. None of us are really wired for change, right? Change is hard. How have you managed to avoid a lot of those pitfalls? How have you, for example, managed to avoid the all talk, no action pitfall that so many fall into? Because that's never been an issue here, right? It's never been an issue. You've got your postcards, you're all going to write down what you've learned today, not only what you've learned, but what you're going to put into practice. Somehow you've managed to do that. So here's my first observation as to how you've done that. Who recognizes this guy? Lady in the second row.
Oh, you want me to tell
I do, yeah.
Oh, no, now I'm really...
You dried up, you see. There we are, yeah. Any other rugby aficionados in the audience? At the back. Finn Russell. Bath, Scotland, and British Lions, right? British and Irish Lions, should I say. Right, about to leave on the plane for Australia. What do we think about when we think about Finn? What words come to mind for the rugby nuts in the audience? Playmaker. He's a playmaker. What else? Talented. We like that. Talented. Exciting. Yeah. Magical. Not, yeah, easy on the eye. Yeah. Some would say easy on the eye. Others might say he's carried a bit of ball up in his time, looking at his face. But he's doing very well. He's doing very well. Very exciting, very magical. I mean, quite often in a game, anyone who follows the rugby will know that he's to be found in this sort of situation, with 5 tacklers hanging off him, trying to rip his head off, and still somehow he manages to get the ball away to a colleague. But the point I wanted to make and I wanted to illustrate about Finn here is he plays with his head up. And he's always very imaginative, he's always very innovative, and he's always very bold at bringing the best placed teammate into play. He doesn't score himself very often, rarely gets a try himself, but he makes loads of tries because he's got this great awareness, boldness, and imagination to bring others into play. And I've seen that time and time again with the projects you've undertaken. Being imaginative, being innovative, being bold in finding the best person or the best group in that particular space to help with the particular change project that you've got in mind up here in Scotland. So when it comes to picking your collaborators, channel Finn. That's my first observation. And if you're going to collaborate with the very best in the space, it makes absolute sense, does it not, to put your best team on it. And this is my second observation of what you've done here in Scotland as a community, right? Whenever we're thinking about change management, there's always a tension between the change and the business as usual, because we've got to uphold standards. We've got to keep the day-to-day stuff going as well. We can't let that slip. So where do you put your best people? Time and time again, I've seen RRG and the whole community putting your best people on the change. Why? Well, A, it means that gives the change the best chance of succeeding. It also avoids flavor of the month syndrome, right? Because it actually creates an expectation that change will happen and change will be followed through. It won't be abandoned. It won't be something else next month. And we're going to be on this journey right to the bitter end, right? But what, you may ask, about the business as usual? We can't let that slip. Again, one of the things I've seen is that boldness that you've exuded and that boldness that you've put into practice by always looking to find somebody who's ready to step up and who can see stepping into the gap that's been created in the business as usual as a development opportunity for themselves. It also gives you some breathing space in whatever organization you happen to be in. So my second observation is you've always put your best team on it. You've always put your best team on it. But where are you going to invest your time? A few years ago, 2 mathematicians again, they're everywhere, right? Peter Jaworski and Marcin Patera from Poland published a paper in a mathematics journal, and it described a phenomenon of when significant change is introduced into any population of people, any normal distribution of people. And broadly, what they concluded is that 20% will support the change no matter what, 20% will resist the change no matter what, and what does the majority of people in the middle do? They wait to see who wins, right? They wait to see who wins. So the question is, where do we invest our time and energy? The temptation, of course, is to invest it down here in, let's call them the naysayers, yeah? In the naysayers. They're the ones with the objections. They're often the more exercised, the ones who are higher maintenance. And you can spend an awful lot of time invested here trying to win them over. Now, I'm not for a moment suggesting that you ignore that group or that you don't respect that group, because often in this group are the experts who know most about the current state, right? So you must take into account their views, but do it in the preparation phase. This is what I've observed up here time and time again. Do it in the preparation phase, right? So you make sure that the change you're going to put through has taken into account their views, often expert views. But once you commit to the change, what I see is putting all your weight behind the yay-sayers. Why? Well, again, it gives the chance, the best chance of success for the particular change initiative you're trying to get through, right? That's the first thing. The second thing, crucially, because we're trying to swing this group our way behind the change, right? All of the attention, the acclaim, maybe the awards, the recognition, the development opportunities, they're going to start accruing to this group up here as that change builds momentum. And what's going to happen to this group when they see that? They're going to want to be part of that because people generally want to be with winners. Yeah. So none of this is easy, but broadly, the third observation I've made as to how you've developed this culture of change up here north of the border is to back the naysayers. Back the naysayers. Respect the naysayers, but back the naysayers. Yeah? That's my third observation. Saying all that, it's really important to recognize that change should be different, right? It should feel different. Just a little exercise, probably a little, you might think this is a bit of a trivial or simplistic exercise, but it hopefully illustrates the point. Would you all mind putting your hands up in front of you with your fingers apart? Okay? Now, clasp your hands together with your fingers interwoven. How does that feel? How does it feel? Secure? What other words have we got? How else are we feeling? Familiar? Yeah? Comforting. Familiar, comforting, all of those things. Now, if you wouldn't mind opening them up again, this time when you put them back together, can you do it the other way around? So if you had your right thumb on top last time, put your left thumb on top this time and vice versa. So put them back together the wrong way around, yeah? Might take you a few goes. All right. There we are. How does that feel? Different, yeah. Yeah, awkward, different, awkward. Bit weird, maybe. Maybe unfamiliar, uncomfortable. I mean, there's nothing fundamentally wrong. Your fingers are still interlocked. You've still got strength in your hands. You've still got all the properties you had before, but it just feels a little bit uncomfortable. And as a change culture develops, as you've got up here in Scotland, as a change culture develops, people start expecting change. And they start kind of expecting to get that feeling from time to time. So we should be looking out for the butterflies in the stomach. We should be looking to get those from time to time on a fairly regular basis. We're not talking about raw fear. We're just talking about butterflies in the stomach from trying something new. But a big part of what you've achieved up here, in my observation, is that change does feel different. Change is expected. You are all expecting to fill out your cards. You are all expecting to get them posted to you. And you know that you're going to be asked next year, how did it all go, right? So change should feel different. And then the final point I'd like to make really is the importance of believing and keeping that belief going. And in this respect, Margaret Mead's words pretty much sum this up. Back to Mrs. Webster. Mrs. Webster and I were fortunate enough to be invited to a church service celebrating the 80th anniversary of Christian Aid last week. It was a wonderful service, and the message, the mantra that came across very, very loud and clear was that what Christian Aid represented and all the work that it had done over all these 80 years was the unstoppable power of hope in action. The unstoppable power of hope in action. And it got me thinking that when it comes to moving the needle in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, all the wonderful work that we've celebrated today, all those milestones on the diagram up the mountain, all the information and the progress that Jim shared in his talk earlier in the program. To me, everything you've done and everything you embody is that, the unstoppable power of hope in action. So as we close the day out, and I'm going to hand off to Gareth now, please keep believing, keep collaborating, keep being awesome, because the work that you do brings hope to a great many people. Thank you very much.